Hi everybody, this is James Green with ActualTech Media, and I've got a briefing update for you today. This one comes from Oracle Ravello, and they've got a big announcement this week. This is something that I've been in a couple of briefings about over the last couple of months. They're announcing the Oracle Ravello service on Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And if that's not something that you have heard of before, either one of them, you might not be the only one. They're both relatively new to me over the course of the last year or so, and I think a lot of people are just starting to find out about both. Now, Ravello, if you're in the virtualization community and have been doing virtualization for a long time, is something that you might have heard of because they kind of made a splash in the virtualization space, especially with regard to VMware. Because what Ravello did as a startup is they created a product that allows users to migrate a VM from their on-premises VMware infrastructure to the public cloud, and in the iterations of it that I used, it was AWS or Google Cloud, and you could essentially run your Amazon or Google Cloud VMs as replicas of your VMware VMs without having to change your VMware VM, which is something that is a problem for a lot of people who are looking to do some sort of cloud migration. You probably know, if you've looked into this at all, there's a lot of things that have to be changed or accounted for when you're migrating from on-premises to the public cloud. Some of the big things are networking. Layer 2 networking in the public cloud is either non-existent or totally not what you're used to. So especially in like multi-tiered apps, you're not going to have the networking constructs that you're used to dealing with. And so you have to account for that, rebuild your app to work at layer 3, or find some way to work around it. In this case, Ravello provided that mechanism. Another thing that's a problem is your VMware VM itself does not natively run on AWS or Google Cloud or wherever. And so you would have to rebuild the VM or use some sort of conversion mechanism, like Amazon provides one, but it's tricky. And so Ravello built this tool that would allow you to essentially drag and drop these VMs from your on-premises data center to the cloud and build the networking over there that looks just like the networking in your on-premises data center and go. And it was awesome. For better or for worse, Ravello kind of got a name for being especially helpful in the dev test space, in the lab space, and I think that's for better, personally. They provided a way for developers who had lots of different configurations to test, or people who were labbing out different scenarios for an application they're trying to build, or I think some people used it for like load testing, so they'd see how many instances they could spin up of this app that's meant to run in your VMware data center. But for testing purposes, they wanted to just spin it up for a short period of time in the AWS cloud, for example. So I think that was a good thing, but they were not as well known for production enterprise applications. And so a little while back, I'm not honestly sure on the date off the top of my head, I think probably 18 months ago maybe, Ravello was acquired by Oracle. And a lot of people in the virtualization community said, well, it's probably the last we'll see of Ravello, because to be honest, Oracle has not had the greatest reputation in the virtualization space. But I've been out to hear from Oracle Ravello a couple of times, and I gotta say, I've been very surprised by the progress that Oracle is making in being relevant to cloudy kind of IT today. And what they have done with Ravello is continue down the path they were headed, but make it more robust and even more applicable to enterprise IT shops for production, dev tests, the whole software development lifecycle. And I'm actually really impressed with what they've done with it. So what you're going to hear following this introduction is a recording of the briefing that I was on this week about the announcement that is they're offering Oracle Ravello on Oracle Cloud infrastructure. Now, something that's interesting about that is the what was also at one point known as bare metal cloud, the Oracle Cloud, is that besides being a neat cloud offering all to its own, running Ravello specifically on Oracle Cloud infrastructure is very interesting, because since Oracle has acquired Ravello, Ravello now has unique access to the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and they can do things there that they wouldn't be able to do on some other third-party cloud provider. And so part of the big announcement this week is if you're going to run Ravello and you choose to run it on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, one of the things that can be done there that can't do in other places is the hypervisor called HVX that Ravello built as in the first iteration as kind of a shim to basically do nested virtualization of your VMware VMs. It's become its own hypervisor that can run on bare metal, just like, say, when you install ESXi on bare metal in your data center. HVX will run, this is an option, it's not the only option, but you can now run HVX on bare metal in the Oracle Cloud. And from a performance perspective, from a feature perspective, it offers you a lot more. You're going to hear in the briefing that you can do, I think in some configurations they set up to 14 times better performance, up to 4 times larger configurations of the VMs. And that's a function of the fact that Ravello has direct access to the bare metal in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. So it's a very neat offering. You're going to hear all about it and see a live demo in the briefing that follows. So I hope you'll enjoy and check out the Ravello on Oracle Cloud infrastructure.
So before we again go too deep into the weeds, I want to spend a few minutes just giving you a very high-level overview of what Ravello is and the benefit it brings to the table for most enterprises. So Oracle Ravello is a cloud service, and essentially what it enables for enterprises is that if they have a VMware-based application, a multi-VM application running in their data center, they can run it on public cloud without having to make any changes. You're able to take the same VMs that you have on-premise, you'll keep the networking exactly the same as well, keep the storage exactly the same as well, and as such, you are able to create a high-fidelity replica of your on-prem application that you have in your data center on top of the public cloud with Oracle Ravello. And that is the key value that Ravello essentially brings to the table. Since you do not have to make any modifications or changes to your application, you can really accelerate the move to the cloud for your application. So before we go too deep into Ravello, let's look at what are the challenges associated with alternatives. If you have an on-prem application and if you wanted to leverage public cloud to run this application, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. At a very broad level, public cloud is very different from data center environment, and as such, there are key things that you need to engage in before your on-prem application is up and running on public cloud. The very first one is your on-prem application today, in most cases, run on VMware, which is running on ESXi. Public clouds, most public clouds cannot run VMware VMs. They use either Xen as a hypervisor or KVM as a hypervisor or Hyper-V as a hypervisor. And as such, you have to take your existing VMware VM, convert it into one of these other virtualization formats before you can actually run this. And this is one-way street. Once you have made conversions to your existing VM to be a Xen VM or a KVM VM or a Hyper-V VM to run it on, say, Google Cloud or Azure or AWS, you cannot bring it back to its existing VMware state. So as a result, this is a one-way street, and it requires re-platforming, and it's a bit of a cumbersome process for most enterprises to go through. Still doable, but it's more work. The second challenge that enterprises run into is that an application in their environment is rarely completely virtualized or completely on physical host. It's typically a mix of the two. Some components of that application are virtualized, some components are on physical hosts. And as a result, when they look to move to public cloud, they have to do some P2V conversions for specifically the physical entities of this application, because there's no physical host on public cloud. And that again requires some changes to the application. Also, entails work, time, etc. Still doable, but more work. The third challenge that enterprises run into is the networking on public cloud is very, very different compared to what's supported on data centers. So on public cloud, you cannot have access to layer 2 networking. So things like broadcast, multicast that you are used to using in a data center-like environment would just stop working. So as a result, now you as an enterprise have to basically re-network your application to align with layer 3 networking concepts that are supported on public cloud, and also change the IP addresses, etc. So network configuration for the application also gets changed. In some cases, enterprises decide that, hey, there are certain functions that I'm used to in a data center environment, which rely on these layer 2 capabilities are not going to work. So they sort of have to go through a very painful exercise of, deciding whether some features they can let go of versus not. So just as an example, if you have high availability or clustering in your data center, chances are that it's using some sort of a broadcast or a multicast protocol for it to function. The moment you go to public cloud natively, this capability needs to be re-implemented using a layer 3 construct as the layer 2 simply. So this is where most enterprises start to really feel the pain, really see and really start to trip over. The final one here is that most applications are typically fronted with a networking or a security appliance. And even if they're provided by the same vendor, the cloud versions of these networking or security appliances are very different from what you have access to in data center. So just as an example, let's look at a load balancer from F5. Now F5 has this load balancer called Big IP, very popular. And most enterprises, run some version of it in their own data center. Now, the moment you go to public cloud, there is a F5 load balancer Big IP that is available for public cloud as well. But the feature functionality supported by the public cloud version differs vastly from the data center version of the same appliance. As a result, you have to reconfigure. You have to again sort of make some trade-offs between features, functionality, relicense, etc. Now, if you look at all these 4 activities together, it's a ton of work. It requires application rewrites, replatforming, renetworking, which is very expensive and time-consuming. So these are the key challenges people run into when they try to take their existing on-prem environment to the public cloud natively and have to sort of bear the brunt of it. Ravello, on the other hand, really helps them accelerate their move to the cloud. And the reason is that with Ravello, we are able to make the underlying public cloud infrastructure look and feel exactly like a data center. So as a result, you don't have to make any changes to your application. Your VMs run as is. Your VMware application stays exactly as is. Same VM, storage, networking. And since we are not making any changes to your application, this really helps accelerate that move to the cloud. The second key capability that really helps is that we support data center like layer 2 networking. So things like broadcast, multicast all work. Your network configuration of your cloud-based application looks exactly the same as what you had on-prem, right down to the IP addresses and net masks. So as a result, since you don't have to change any networking as well, you can really accelerate that move to the cloud. Another key capability that Ravello supports is this concept of blueprinting, which essentially helps you take a snapshot of not only the application and its VMs, but also the networking and the storage interconnect around it. It's basically helping you take a snapshot of the application and the infrastructure around it. And as a result of this key blueprinting capability, you're able to create multiple replicas of an application for a variety of different use cases, such as maybe dev test, UAT staging, and also use this blueprinting capability to move your application between different cloud regions as well, with literally one click. And finally, with Ravello supporting 23 different regions around the world, it really helps the enterprises get a local user experience for their application, no matter where they're located. They're able to deploy it to the region that's closest to them and scale their application as they need. These are the 4 key capabilities that really helps in terms of accelerating enterprises move to the cloud. And these are the capabilities that we have supported. Now, over the course of last year or so, post Oracle acquisition, we have been working on some really cool capabilities, and these are the capabilities that we will be announcing on Thursday, and we want to give you a sneak preview of. The first thing that we are going to be doing is offering a ton of better performance. Compared to Ravello's previous generation, you can run up to 14x higher for applications on top of Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And that's a very significant performance boost, as you can imagine. And I'll go into the technical details of what's really powering this performance boost in the subsequent slide as well. Another key capability that we are announcing here is access to enhanced network services with Ravello running on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or bare metal cloud, and the network integration that it brings to the table. This will enable internal network connectivity between Ravello-based VMs back to Oracle PaaS and IaaS services. And in addition to that, it will also enable Ravello-based applications to exercise and utilize the network services that are native to bare metal cloud or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, such as VPN as a service, Fast Connect, etc. Another key capability that we are going to be announcing is the bigger VMs. Today, on other, on our existing regions, we support, a maximum of 8 virtual CPUs per VM. With Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we are going to be announcing the support for 4 times bigger VMs, going all the way up to 32 vCPUs per VM. And as you can imagine, this really helps enterprises to scale their application vertically as well. We already support the horizontal scaling. Many of our customers run up to 2,000 VMs in the same application, but with 4 times bigger VMs available to them, they'll be able to scale their application vertically as well, all the way up to 32 vCPUs. And finally, another key capability that we are going to be announcing on September 21st is the concept of availability groups. Suppose you have an application which has to run in an HA mode. So as a result, you have 2 parts of this application which are copies of each other. They are failover pairs of each other. And since you are running them on top of cloud, you want to ensure that these 2 failover pairs do not go dark if one of the regions goes dark for the underlying cloud. With availability groups, what we will be enabling is a concept of host anti-affinity that will enable enterprises to spread these failover pairs for these mission critical workloads across availability domains. So as a result, you can have 1 copy of a failover pair running on one availability domain, another copy of the failover pair running in another availability domain for the same region. And as a result, if one of those ADs were to go dark because of some issues, the other copy of that failover pair continues to service your request. And again, that's a very key capability that we are going to be announcing for Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure on September 21st. I'll take a brief pause here to see if there's any questions. This is, one of the key meaty things that we wanted to bring you guys up to speed on.
This is Rich from Tech Field Day, and I was just wondering, is the 14-time performance boost, is that tied to the greater availability of CPUs per VM, or is that independent of that?
That's a great question. This is independent of that. This is for like comparison, across the previous generation of Ravello and the newer generation of Ravello on OCI. So for example, if you're looking for, say, some performance on 8 virtual CPUs on the previous generation of Ravello, and you compare it to the performance that you'll get for the same 8 vCPUs on Ravello on OCI, for some workloads, you will see up to 14x boost for the same number of vCPUs. Of course, if you throw in more resources, more vCPUs, you'll see a greater scaling beyond that.
Okay, I can't wait to hear more details on that. Stephen from Gestalt IT2.
Sorry, come again, Rich?
I'm just saying I can't wait to hear more about that.
Sure. We'll be happy to kind of walk you through the details, as a follow-on. But essentially, what we are going to be, what we have done is we have done performance benchmark tests. Of course, for any application, it varies depending on the profile of the application, how it's deployed, etc. But for like applications, you'll be able to see 14x performance, up to 14x performance boost as well. So as you can imagine, with Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, this really enables a very unique capability as an enterprise. If your application is spread between some virtualized hosts and physical hosts today, say just as an example, your app tier and web tier is on VMware, and it's connected to, say, Oracle database on a physical host itself, and you wanted to move this to the cloud. Today, without Ravello on OCI, you'd have to go through a very painful process of re-platforming these virtual machines onto the cloud image format. You'd have to do P2V conversions for these physical hosts. You'd have to change the networking therein. It's a lot of work, which basically adds to the timeline for that migration project, escalates the cost, introduces uncertainty for success, etc. With Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or bare metal cloud, this shift becomes very, very seamless. For the virtualized hosts, which are, say, for example, in this case, VMware virtualized, you can move these VMware VMs as is onto the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure with Ravello. The VMs stay exactly the same, no conversions needed, no replatforming needed. The networking stays exactly the same. You can even keep the same IP addresses, netmasks, etc. And the storage stays exactly the same as well. For the physical hosts, you can move them to the bare metal cloud service, which is also a part of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, with some small changes, and more or less your application stays exactly the same, and you're able to really accelerate that move to the cloud because of the process being very simple. So, I've made some very big claims in the previous slide. So I want to back it up with a demo. I want to walk you through how it looks, what are the key capabilities. And as a part of this live demo, what I will do is show you how you can upload your virtual machines to Ravello. How do you create a Ravello-based high fidelity replica for that application? And how do you deploy it to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure? And as an optional step, how do you spin up as many high fidelity, isolated copies of this application for a variety of different, needs, just dev test, UAT, staging, etc. So at this point, I'm going to move to the web browser, and let me just increase the font size, and I'm going to log into my account at cloud.ravellosystems.com. Once I'm logged in, this is the first screen that I'm greeted with. It essentially lists all the applications that I have in my account. Each of these line items is essentially a multi-tier, multi-VM environment. The very first step that I need to do to create a new application which is a high fidelity clone of my on-prem application, is to click on this button which says Create Application. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to say AG demo and hit create. Now, the moment I do so, I'm greeted with this empty canvas, and I get this option to import my existing virtual machine. When I do so, when I click on this button, it'll essentially prompt me to download a thin client, which is going to run on my loopback address. And once I have logged in to this tool, it'll show me, oops, maybe the password was wrong. Yes. it'll show me this import tool, which gives me a couple of different options to upload my virtual machines. The first option is to point it to a vCenter or vSphere by providing the FUDN for that server, the admin username and password. And once I log in, it lists out all the different virtual machines that are running on that vCenter vSphere. And at that point in time, I can select whichever VMs I want uploaded, and it'll essentially upload it onto my Ravello VM library. Other couple of options that I have available is to point it to a VM disk image in an OVF, OVA, QCOW, ISO format, and essentially it'll upload it to my VM library, and it's going to show up in this list. Now these are all unmodified, same VMs that you had in your data center. No changes have been made to either the VMs or the networking. Once I have these VMs uploaded to my library and they show up in this list, the next step for me is to basically drag and drop these VMs onto this canvas. So I'm dragging and dropping 4 VMs that I have uploaded ahead of time. It essentially has a load balancer, 2 app servers, and a backend database server. And the moment I do so, drag and drop these onto this canvas, and I click on the network, you'll see that Ravello has automatically gone behind the scenes, and based on the information that it was able to extract from each of these VMs, it has recreated the network setup as it was in my on-prem environment. It has figured out, hey, each of these VMs had these NICs. They were all connected to this subnet, and each were communicating with each other. So it creates a virtual router. It also has some built-in services such as DNS, switches, DHCP, IP filtering services in case you want to use them. But once you drag and drop it, you already have your application set up for you. And at this point in time, I'm actually ready to run this application on the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. If I want to make any modifications to it before I do so, I can certainly do that as well by clicking on any of these VMs, and it gives me the option to make changes to these VM properties. I can click on any of these tabs and change things like host name, attach an SSH key pair, throw more virtual CPUs, RAM at it, add additional disks to it, add additional network interface card to it, do things like adding a VLAN interface, layer 2 networking, things that typically you wouldn't be able to do on public cloud. I have access to do all of that. Now, to run it on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, all I need to do is click on this button which says Publish. It gives me a very quick summary of all the resources my application is going to utilize. And I can run it in a cost-optimized mode where the most economical region is picked behind the scenes for me, or I can run it in a performance-optimized mode where I have access to any of the 23 different regions that we support. To run it on the bare metal cloud region, I'm going to choose US Southwest 1, which is the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure bare metal cloud region based out of Phoenix, and I'll hit publish. At this point in time, you'll see that each of these VMs have an hourglass. It essentially means that we are in the process of provisioning these hosts on top of US Southwest 1 or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure region Phoenix. The whole process from start to finish takes something between 3 to 6 minutes, and at the end of 6 minutes, you'll have a fully functional live environment at your disposal, which looks something like this. It basically has a green play icon, which means it's all booted up and ready to go. Now, in order to access this environment, all you need to do is click on any of these VMs, hit console. It starts a VNC tunnel right there from the web browser that you can use to access this VM. Or if you have associated a public IP with any of the network interface cards, you can click on that and you have access to that application as well through that interface. Once you have set this up for the first time, and if you want multiple high fidelity clones of it for UAT staging, security testing, etc., you don't need to go through this exercise of setting it up again. All you need to do is click on this button which says save as a blueprint, give it some name, click create. It'll take a snapshot of the VM and the infrastructure around it. And the next time you want to deploy it to another bare metal cloud region, say for example, based on an existing blueprint, all you need to do is say create an application from this blueprint, and I have a high fidelity clone of this application that I can deploy it to another bare metal cloud region, say for example US East 5, again with literally one click. So it's a very effective platform for an enterprise to take their existing VMware environments onto Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and also move this environment across different regions on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure as well. So I know I kind of walked us through quite a few things in a very short amount of time. I'll take a brief pause here to see if you guys have any questions on the product walkthrough.
What's the max size for VMs? Do you guys have a max size that you can upload, or what have you guys tested?
From VM resources standpoint, we can go as high as 32 virtual CPUs and 200 gigs of RAM per VM. You can have thousands of these VMs on the same application, so you can scale vertically and horizontally.
No, I'm sorry. So from an upload perspective, like if I have a 2 terabyte VM, like what's the max size you guys have tested, and what's the variability or your penchant for disconnects and things like that during the upload process?
So upload process basically depends on a bunch of things, right? It depends on the network connectivity between where you're trying to upload it to and Ravello's VM library. But from disk standpoint, if you're looking for size on the disk itself, we can go as high as 18 terabytes per VM for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure today. And then of course we are working on bumping these numbers up in the months to come.
I'm just curious, are you guys seeing this as being production ready, or is this something kind of in Ravello's history as being lab focused?
That's a great question. So as you can see, we have focused quite a lot on things like higher performance, bigger VMs to enable vertical scalability, HA capabilities such as host anti-affinity. So all of these things on with Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is essentially towards creating a production grade infrastructure for the enterprises. So production use cases are definitely supported. Any other questions? Okay, so let me switch back to the slides. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me along the way. I'd love to kind of go into more details. Just to sort of touch upon the technology that's powering our platform. Essentially, our key IP in the space is our hypervisor HVX, which essentially runs on top of the underlying cloud infrastructure. So, we would be grabbing a cloud VM, which is an x86 machine with some hypervisor from the underlying cloud, and then we'll put our hypervisor, which has 3 components: a nested virtualization engine, software-defined networking overlay, storage overlay on top of it, and we'll be putting the enterprises with VMware VMs on top of it, right? These 3 components have a very specific purpose. The nested virtualization engine exposes the VMware virtual devices to the VMs on top so that they are able to run without any modifications needed at all. The networking overlay essentially exposes a clean layer 2 interface to the VMs. So, we are able to do the things like broadcast, multicast, IP addresses exactly the same. And the storage overlay essentially abstracts the underlying cloud storage and exposes the local block storage for the VM. This is the technology that kind of powers us, powers our platform. Now, since our acquisition, we have been working on some very cool things in this space. We have, different modes of operation for HVX. Until today, we used to do the nested virtualization in a software-assisted mode, where essentially we would get this cloud host with an x86 machine, some hypervisor from the underlying cloud. We'd put our HVX on top of it and the customer's VMs on top of that, and we'd do the nested virtualization in software essentially. Now, with Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we are enabling 2 additional modes of operation, which is the key reason why you're going to see a ton of better performance, bigger VM sizes, and a whole host of other things. These 2 modes essentially are, the first one is hardware-assisted nested virtualization, where instead of doing the nested virtualization in software at HVX, we are able to leverage the hardware extensions that are supported by Oracle Cloud Infrastructure to do the nested virtualization in hardware. Now, as you can imagine, this capability really brings a ton of better performance, and you can expect up to 14x better performance compared to what you would get with software-based nested virtualization. With another mode that we are introducing, you will be able to run HVX directly on top of the bare metal server. And as you can imagine, with one lesser hypervisor in the middle, it offers even better performance, more than 14x compared to what you would expect on software-based nested virtualization. Now, I just want to sort of highlight that, again, these are just guideline numbers. Actual performance very much depends on the type of application, the traffic, how the application is spread across the host. But this is just to sort of give you a bit of an idea into up to what performance boost you can sort of get across the different modes of operation. Again, I just do want to caveat that performance is a very tricky thing. It depends on a whole host of conditions. So we are not claiming that it's 14x or greater than 14x. It's again based on some tests that we have done for specific applications. This is what we have seen. Any questions on this? Okay. So again, I want to come back to the question that was raised earlier. Traditionally, Ravello has focused on mostly, dev test type workloads, mostly pre-production workloads. With Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we are enabling, capabilities that helps us enable, use cases across the enterprise application lifecycle. Say, for example, you as an enterprise is trying to decide between multiple different vendors for an application. You need several different POC environments, and with Ravello on OCI, you can very easily spin up these POC environments on demand as needed. Once you have made a decision that, hey, I'm gonna do some integration, some dev test with this specific chosen application, you can easily spin up dev test environments with one click, and easily embrace CI/CD processes while keeping your same VMware VMs very easily. Once you have finished with your dev test and you want to maybe do some IT ops type use cases such as UAT, staging, etc., again, you can very easily spin up staging environments with literally one click on Ravello. Once you have passed that stage and you want to ensure that your application is fully secure before you go for production, and you want to do some penetration testing, security testing, Ravello is an excellent platform for doing that as well, because it'll help you create a high fidelity clone of your application so that you have full coverage to uncover any gaps when it comes to security for your application and fix them very easily. And once you have done security testing and you're fully comfortable, you want to go live, Ravello is an excellent platform for doing production applications as well. And once your application has gone live on production and you want to maybe train your workforce on it, it's an excellent platform for creating clones of this application for training purposes as well. So with Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we are able to enable a variety of different use cases across the application lifecycle for enterprise. So just to give you a bit of a flavor for one of these use cases. We have a customer called SimSpace. They build cyber ranges for U.S. Department of Defense and big Wall Street banks. And cyber ranges are essentially very large and complex environments. Think of 1,500 to 2,000 to 3,000 VMs plus, which mimic the enterprise's own infrastructure, complete with applications, networking, and these environments are used to train the cyber ops teams in these enterprises for cyber warfare, cyber security, any attack mitigation, and things like that. Now, for such a very sophisticated environment, you need huge scale. You need access to data center-like capabilities, and you need the ability to emulate the enterprise environments right down to the traffic, the network, etc. SimSpace is able to deploy these huge cyber ranges on top of Ravello, literally in a matter of minutes. They are able to do a 1,500 VM cyber range in literally 15 minutes. Before they started using Ravello to deploy this in a data center, it used to take them a couple of days of very intensive work. Now, anytime they want to spin up a cyber range, it's very easy for them to take an existing blueprint of a cyber range, click publish, and within 15 minutes, that huge environment is up and running for them to do cyber warfare and cyber ops testing with. And the benefits don't stop there. Enterprises also save a ton of money with Ravello. Most enterprises have a mix of production and pre-production environments. Say, for example, there's an enterprise app which has 10 VMs. Enterprise has one production environment, 6 pre-production copies are typically in existence for dev, QA, UAT, staging, etc. And to run these 70 environments, enterprises would typically need 6 physical servers. To run this on-premise is a very expensive proposition for most enterprises. A 3-year TCO looks to roughly $244K. If that enterprise runs this on Ravello, on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, it would cost them roughly $104K, which is about 57% savings compared to running it on-prem. So, the value doesn't stop only with performance. It actually, impacts the costs as well. So, just to summarize, Ravello is a key platform. It really helps enterprises to avoid costs and pain points associated with traditional migration paths. With Ravello, enterprises are able to move to cloud as is, saving them a lot of time and money. They're able to spin up and multiple copies of these environments and deploy them rapidly using our blueprinting capability. And again, there's no setup overhead associated. It's literally one click, spin up using a blueprint, and it actually saves them a lot of money. So those are some of the key values that Ravello brings to the table. And with Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, the fact that we are able to offer a ton of better performance, bigger VMs, access to enhanced network services, and also capabilities such as availability groups that help drive HA on the platform as well. We are targeting production and pre-production workloads as well. So I know I kind of whizzed past quite a few things in a very short amount of time. I'll take a pause here to see if there's any questions.
How does the pricing work? So one of the things I've been doing, I'm watching this and ever since the blogger day, just figuring out how this offering differs from VMware and AWS. And there's quite a bit actually, but I'm curious on how the pricing works. And if you guys have a calculator available for people that want to go ahead and do this migration.
Right, no, absolutely. Yeah, so one of the unique value props of Ravello is you are able to spin up, any size or scale of an environment. We can you can spin up one VM, or if you want to have thousands of VMs. It's very easy to scale, and pricing scales based on the usage. And that's, I think, one of the unique differentiators for Ravello on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure compared to, say, VMware Cloud on AWS that is mentioned. Because from what I understand, there's minimum requirements associated for VMware Cloud on AWS to 4 hosts and things like that. With Ravello, right, you can start off with even one VM if you wanted, and based on how many resources you consume, which is basically for any application, how many vCPUs and RAM and storage you use, does the pricing scale accordingly. So there's no minimum entry requirement, and there's no step function associated when you want more resources as well. We actually have a very easy to use pricing calculator available on our website. If you go to ravellosystems.com/pricing, it walks you through the ability to price out an application to run on Ravello in 3 simple steps. I think it asks you questions on what is the number of resources you need, say vCPUs, RAM, and storage, what kind of networking do you have in your application, and whether you want to run it in a performance optimized or a cost optimized mode, and it kind of gives you a $1 per hour pricing, which is all inclusive of Ravello and the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure costs put together as one.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have another question around operationalizing this, especially if you're targeting production workloads for this. If I'm an enterprise that's used to VMware, it's a great value proposition to say, hey, you don't have to re-platform this or refactor these apps. You can just move it, no changes needed. But how does the operations staff have to change in order to be able to continue doing business? Because I imagine they can't continue to use their own tools with the same tools they've been using, especially the ones from VMware.
Right. That's a great point that you just highlighted. One of enterprises typically work in 2 different modes, right? Most of the mature enterprises actually do a lot of automation around how they provision workloads, how they run workloads. They typically don't use the user interface as you and I would for maybe a couple of workloads, right? When they are doing things at scale, they have to build a lot of automation around it. So what we have seen is most mature enterprises, they prefer to integrate with our REST APIs. We have actually, let me just go on to our website and show you our REST APIs. If you go to our website, we have full-blown REST APIs that enterprises can use with examples. So that they are able to integrate, deploying, provisioning, orchestrating workloads on Ravello with the existing processes that they have or existing systems that they have in place. And of course, our user interface also gives them the ability to, spin up workloads as they need. I do agree that there's a bit of a learning involved when you're starting to use Ravello, but it's a fairly intuitive interface for people to be able to kind of run their workloads. Did I answer your question?
It did. I guess so. There's nothing. I mean, a lot of the enterprises that I deal with, I mean, they have large enterprise apps to do monitoring, and whether that's like a vRealize operations or a SolarWinds or a CA product, they might have some automation, and maybe there's some groups within those enterprises that have that level of sophistication, but most of them are relying on some of these tools that they're not going to be able to use anymore. Is there anything within either OCI or Oracle IaaS similar to what like AWS provides, like with CloudWatch or something similar? Like, how am I supposed to? It would be great to be able to see, especially before the announcement on Thursday, of how do I take this end to end onto OCI, right? I have an application that I'm using today, SimSpace, great use case. You know, however they were doing it in one fashion on-prem, yeah, I mean, the provisioning and the deployment's great, but what did they change in their monitoring and operationalizing that to be able to work with this service?
Right. No, that's again a great point you have made. The way people do things on the cloud is a lot different from the way they do things on-premise, right? And what Ravello enables is for you to be able to keep the same sort of operational processes, the same sort of utilities that you are used to on-premise from monitoring standpoint. So, for example, if you are utilizing, a third-party tool which has some sort of an agent inside your virtual machine to monitor the stats for that VM, and using that application's interface to get a single pane of glass view of how the health of these VMs is across the board for your on-prem application, you would be able to utilize the same set of tools on Ravello as well, as long as they have a bit of an agent-based model to operate in, right? Because those VMs will have those agents. The aggregation software will work as is on top of Ravello as well. So that piece should work as is. The area where this is a little bit different from on-prem is if your application is relying on some ESXi-based capabilities from a monitoring standpoint, then obviously that won't be supported because we are not running ESXi on Ravello.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Any other questions?
Hey, Abby, it seems like there's no more questions. I'm not seeing them on chat. I'd like to start wrapping up. So thanks, Abby, for sharing all these info. Oh, did you have one more slide you want to cover?
Oh no, just wanted to share some customers that have been using Ravello for last couple of years, and I think that's pretty much the last slide I have.